Lot Studios, untangling your Christmas lights faster than you can say, but I'm Jewish, proudly presents...
TomHanksgiving, right here every Tuesday. TomHanksgiving, come on and press play. There's Elvis, the host with the most, yada 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 yada. With a different guest each week, they're the smart ones. Each episode's a new movie about Tom Hanks, the man himself. Of course, it's time for TomHanksgiving. It's the best you can get. It's the rootinest, tootinest podcast on the internet. TomHanksgiving.
Houston, we have a podcast. Howdy, partner. Welcome to TomHanksgiving. It's me, Elvis Kunesh, your host, and we're celebrating Gary Sinise this December, and we're in the middle of it right now, and we're talking about 1995's Ron Howard-directed Apollo 13. Today, I am joined by my guest host, Mr. Ben Shearn.
That's me.
But this is Gary Sinise month, and we kind of didn't have enough to talk about last week with Green Mile, and Forrest Gump and the 50th episode celebration is going to kind of take over next week. So we're going to talk a little bit more about Gary Sinise this week. Let's start with that before we dive into the movie. Why are you an authority on Gary Sinise?
Okay, yeah, authority is maybe a hyperbolic term, but Gary Sinise went to the high school that I went to and graduated from.
Wow!
We both graduated.
The same year, too.
Not the same. Not the same. I'm not that old. Not that Gary Sinise is old.
No.
He's older.
61 years young.
Is that how old he is?
Yeah, born in March 17th,
God,
1955.
Oh, okay. He looks good for 61.
He does. He's older. He's a year older than Hanks. Hanks is 60.
Wow. Mm-hmm. I feel like, well, this is going to be controversial already. I feel like Gary Sinise has kept himself in better embalming fluid than like Hollywood embalming fluid than Tom Hanks has.
You're not wrong.
Not that Tom Hanks is looking rough at all. He just looks like a guy in his 60s.
I mean, you did just see Sully, and he looks a lot older in that movie.
He looks rough in Sully, but also I think
intentionally though.
Yeah. Because
that's what Sully looks like.
He's been through trauma, too.
Yeah, he looks like a folded pile of laundry with gray hair.
But also, again, this is just Clint Eastwood and whatever ancient DP he's got. He's like his buddy who shot it, just lighting it like a game show, shooting it from a low angle, just getting as much like Hank's gullet as possible.
There was good gullet in that movie.
So much Hank's gullet. But inappropriate Hank's gullet, because I feel like, because I also saw Inferno this year, and like they were like playing it to the other side, trying to make him look younger than possible.
Looks pretty good in that movie.
He couldn't be 46 in that movie.
He looks like a solid 47.
A cool 47.
He's older, but looks a little better.
Yeah, sorry.
But I mean, we talked about earlier in the week how Hanks... you and I, not on the show. Oh. How Hanks has type 2 diabetes.
He does.
It's getting, and he regrets how shitty he ate when he was younger. That's what I'm doing right now. So I'm sure I'll be at Hanks's point when I'm 60.
But you know what? If that's what life with diabetes looks like,
that you're still doing great.
You're doing great. Hanks. And you're doing great. Although I don't think that's the message. I don't think it's like if you get diabetes, it's fine, because look at Tom Hanks. He's true. Doing great. He's a millionaire movie star.
And every woman I've ever had come on the show is always like, "Oh, he's not sexy at all." So
really,
yeah,
not even a more sprightly young Hanks.
Very even then, there's no sex appeal.
I don't know. That surprises me. I would think someone that sort of like, I don't know, energetic and funny, and he has this like innate intelligence, I think. Mm-hmm. I should hope that those are sexy qualities. Although I get women being like, "Oh, you don't look at a young Tom Hanks the way you look at like a young Brad Pitt, or like, to date myself, like Richard Gere or something."
Or
an
old Brad Pitt, actually.
Or in any Brad Pitt. Brad Pitt is an unfair example.
Yeah, it was bad.
Well, but also just like the tone of the movies he's in has never. It's just
right. Yeah, even the romantic movies, they're more. And we talked about this when we did them. It's more of like the safe, easy choice. You're not turned on. Because like there is that whole, especially with cinematic portrayals, you kind of like the bad boy.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess you fall in love with Tom Hanks.
He's the guy you bring home to mom.
Right. And I get, but it's like, I guess if you're putting women to the question of like, is he sex? Can you like think of having sex with him?
Yeah.
It is. I guess that is a leap. But I just, why are we separating love and sex?
I don't know. Like,
if you fall in love with someone because they're charming and they're sweet, have sex with them.
That's what I keep telling the women I meet, but they don't.
And for men too. I'm not saying just for,
it's true,
for men.
It's true.
I'm saying for all peoples.
Yeah. There's not nearly not enough overlap, but
Hey, Gary Sinise.
you're the expert.
Gary Sinise. That's just Gary Sinise, because this is gonna
Very sexy man.
We're getting into sexual politics. We're getting into just a place.
We have so many things to cover. We got to move
There's really
on.
a lot to get.
Let's talk about Gary Sinise, though.
Okay.
So you, Blue Island, Illinois, correct?
That's where he was born, but then he moved to the suburbs. Which
Okay.
is Highland Park, which is a North Shore suburb of Chicago. Mm-hmm. So it's about 20 minutes, 30 minutes north on Lake Michigan.
Yeah.
The high school, Highland Park High School, actually has a really good drama program. Gary Sinise and this other actor / producer / writer, John Mayer, they were drama students, and they were brought under the wing of this teacher, Barbara Patterson, who was like the head of the drama department at the high school at the time. And so they put on these shows, and they called themselves the Steppenwolf Theater Company. So that the idea of that company started in my hometown out of the drama program of my high school.
Wow, that's huge.
And I take full credit for it.
You should.
I feel like they knew I was coming, and they knew that they had to set the stage for me attending that high school. So they took Steppenwolf Theater to Chicago, and that's where it
became a huge thing. It is today.
John Malkovich and Laurie Metcalf and, all these sort of like thespians. So that's my connection to Gary Sinise. Do we want to talk about like Gary Sinise in general?
And like just a little bit in general. Obviously, he's most known for roles like the ones he's in these Tom Hanks movies. I think Lieutenant Dan is his biggest one.
Absolutely.
He was also in obviously dozens of others, including Of Mice and Men. He was in some CSI television shows. And most recently, I didn't know this until I checked today, he cameos in Captain America: The Winter Soldier.
Does he?
He's the voiceover at the Captain America museum in the Smithsonian.
Here's the thing. And it's funny that you mentioned that. I didn't know that. As I was driving over, I was thinking about Gary Sinise, and I was thinking about how he took the wrong career path. Because he's such an odd guy. Mm-hmm. He's an odd, I think we were talking about earlier, is sort of reptilian quality.
Yeah, his eyes have such a distinct look.
Yeah.
And there's a slight sinisterness. You can play against that, you can play to that. But he's got a great look for camera.
Totally, but not, I feel like, in the way that he sort of, what he attempted in his career was to become, I think, kind of more of just a general leading man. And he got cast as villains a lot, which I think makes sense. But I was thinking, maybe an interesting path for him to take would have been something like Andy Serkis. Voicing weird characters and sort of he has, it's really his voice. His voice is so odd and so distinct. Maybe he does a lot of voiceover work. I actually didn't look at his IMDb before this, but it's odd that he wants to play a cop or, I think he kind of tried in a way to be an everyman.
Yeah, chasing almost that Hanks career path.
A little bit.
But
I think he was close. He was like Icarus. He flew close to the sun.
Much like our Apollo 13 ship we're going to talk about later.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. And the more I learn about acting and studying it and, occasionally doing it even, it's, especially with casting, so much is reliant, at least for film. It's different, I'm sure, for theater and other performances. But so much of it was reliant on the look of the person and specifically the eyes. Gary Sinise, as amazing as he may be, does not have those kind of his eyes have a certain guardedness to them.
Yeah.
It's hard to when you get into and see the vulnerability in Gary Sinise's eyes, it's usually a barrier has been moved down. We spent the whole performance breaking this wall.
Yeah, he's kind of like having a meltdown. Or he feels like unhinged.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Whereas when you look at Tom Hanks' eyes, it's like an instant connection.
Absolutely. He's so open. He's so inviting. That's not what Gary Sinise was built for.
Just a couple other highlights for Gary Sinise.
Yeah.
Obviously, he started the Lieutenant Dan Band.
What?
You don't know about the Lieutenant?
Don't know.
This is like the most notable thing about him.
What? I have
and
no idea.
He performs USO shows. They go
he
singing.
doesn't.
This is a real thing.
Mind blown.
Yeah.
What do they play, like Dad Rock? They just play like Mustang Sally?
Well, I think it ties into the whole, like, he's all about veterans and stuff like that, because that's the Gary Sinise Foundation. And he's kind of a super Republican. I couldn't find anything about what he said about Trump, but he did support Romney in the last one.
He did?
Yeah, big Republican.
I didn't know any of this.
I didn't know it until like 10 minutes early.
You know what? Don't watch True West. You know what?
I haven't seen True West, obviously.
Don't see it. It's right-wing propaganda.
This might be my favorite performance he's done. I like it more than Lieutenant Dan, I think.
Huh? Why?
I think I like the character more.
Oh.
I think I like the story of the guy who gets left behind. I mean, that's kind of similar to Lieutenant Dan in a way, but we'll focus on this. But I really like him as Ken Mattingly, and let's start talking about.
Let's just get in.
Ben, why don't you tell us what Apollo 13 is about?
Apollo 13 is the thrilling true story of an aborted 1970 NASA lunar mission, which was manned by astronauts Jack Swigert, played by Kevin Bacon, Fred Hayes, played by Bill Paxton, and Jim Lovell, played by Tom Hanks. En route to the moon, there's an explosion on the spacecraft, which drains the vessel of vital oxygen and electricity, which was very bad. The film is then mostly a three-part narrative which cuts between the men in space, the flight controllers struggling to get them home, and Jim Lovell's wife Marilyn as she wades through the stress and anxiety of the crisis.
So, came out in 1995.
Yes.
Ron Howard directed. This is the last Ron Howard movie we get to talk about on the show until he makes another one. And judging from the Inferno box office, that's not going to happen.
Well, it's definitely not going to be out Langdon. Is Ron Howard the director that Tom Hanks has worked with most?
Yes.
Because of like Splash.
Yeah, Splash, Apollo 13, and then the three Langdon
that's got to
movies.
put him over the top.
Zemeckis had Castaway and
Polar Express
and Forrest Gump, obviously.
Yeah.
And Spielberg has 4.
I would venture to say
Hanks is director? Ron Howard's the only director who's worked with Hanks in all 3 of his big periods. Early Hanks was Splash, just coming onto the big movie screen. That was like his first huge movie.
Yeah.
That's when he became a star.
Right.
And then, obviously, he came back in 1995. This is peak Hanks. He's just won the 2 Oscars.
Yeah.
He's in Toy Story the same year this comes out.
Yeah.
This is like his movie, whatever you want to do, and he works with Ron Howard, and it's a fucking great movie. We still haven't talked about it.
We haven't really discussed the movie that is the subject of this podcast.
We're building to it.
Well, you have to set the scene. You have to set the stage. You can't jump in.
And then he's contributed significantly to the latter day Hanks. Unfortunately, I think it's his weakest performances in his later roles.
Yeah.
But they're probably his most seen outside of, I guess, maybe now Sully, and if you count Toy Story 3 as its own entry.
You think most seen? I feel like maybe they've had the biggest box office, but I wonder if adjusted for inflation.
That's true. I mean, obviously, the Da Vinci Code has also been out for a while, and it has sequels, so that's gonna end up, and it was such a huge thing when that came out too.
By the way, I want to join the Church of Latter-day Hanks.
Oh! No, all right. So, but we're talking about Ron Howard. This is a great way to actually finally get into the movie.
Yes.
What do you think of his directing for Apollo 13?
Well, it's interesting that you're like that. You know, by numbers, this would be kind of the defining director of Tom Hanks because I actually, all due respect to Ron Howard, he's very much a studio journeyman, there is there's no shame in being a journeyman director. There's no shame in that. I mean, I think Ron Howard, from acting, to today, has just been a very likable showbiz guy who just wants to be liked and make movies that are liked. And so that's informed, I think, I don't know him personally, but I assume every life and artistic decision he's ever made has just been, what's the most likable, accessible decision I can make at this point? Which has had, I I think Apollo 13 probably his crowning achievement in making something that is likable, that is establishment, that is that just works.
So you're not a fan of The Grinch?
Well, it's funny. It's like when I talk to the younger folks, there's like this generation that grew up on The Grinch that are like, oh, this was like the...
And that's their version, not the animated special.
Right. Yeah, right. And they're like, oh, this is like the defining holiday Christmas movie. But again, that's just Ron Howard being like, oh, Dr. Seuss is likable.
Let's do it.
How do I open up its likability in this big budget way?
So do you think this is his best movie?
I mean, in a way, yes. Well, here's the thing. I actually think if you actually are going to look at Ron Howard's career critically and try to pick up like his most, interesting moments as a director, I actually think Gung Ho would be the movie to talk about.
I haven't seen Gung Ho.
Well, it's very interesting. It's one of those sort of like movies that accidentally, by virtue of its subject matter, it's obviously a forgotten movie, but by virtue of its subject matter, becomes more and more relevant because it's about outsourcing and it's about like trade with, it's about business relationships between China and America.
It doesn't sound very Ron Howard.
Well, it is because it's a fish out of water. It's Michael Keaton, a fish out of water, having to run a Chinese, I think it's a car factory. But again, there's nothing about the directing of that movie that's interesting. I just think by virtue of kind of the subject matter, that's actually like something that has a lasting value.
Similarly, to jump off on A Fish Out of Water.
Yeah,
I think I prefer Splash to this movie.
To Apollo 13.
Yes, Splash. It's a lot more flawed, but I find the subject matter more compelling, similar to you and Gung Ho. But when you compare it to Apollo 13, I think I have more personal attachment to Splash, even though I didn't grow up with it. But Apollo 13 is obviously just a masterclass in craft. Like the tension in this movie, the way he's able to pace it and it moves at like cheetah speed without feeling rushed, blew me away. Like I watched The Green Mile for last week's episode, right? And that took forever.
It's not very, it's not like
pacey. I love that movie. It's great, but it took forever, and I was kind of dreading watching Apollo 13 for this episode. Not because I didn't want to watch it, but like it's going to be a whole night. But that movie flies.
It really does. Well, there's a lot to pack in.
Yeah.
Well, I think,
I want to just say before I never do this. I do this not often enough, but the writing also in this movie is so great. It's obviously based on the book by actual astronaut Jim Lovell.
Yeah.
And also co-written with Jeff Kluger. But the screenwriters, William Broyles Jr., who also worked on Castaway, and Al Reinhardt, they did a fantastic job just pacing the hell out of this. And there's a couple other spots I want to pull out later. But it moves so fast.
Yeah, it's 2 hours and 20 minutes. I mean, it is funny that, like, there are certain movies, and you can credit it to a lot of things, but ultimately you do have to credit it to the director. I think it won, and the only Oscar it won, or one of the 2 Oscars it won, was for Best Editing.
That makes perfect sense.
Because it is 2 hours and 20 minutes. That really, it is still, as a 20-year-old movie, there's not a moment of breath. It's very entertaining. Every moment is sort of filled with information and it's sort of like moving it ahead.
And they're like so genius about like getting. There's actually only a couple things I want to talk about that I have some problems with.
Yeah.
But like so genius is just like it's obvious, it's surface level, but they use it to their full advantage when they just deliver the perfect exposition when Hanks is telling his son exactly what's going to happen in the movie outside of the complications.
Right.
It's like, oh, okay, so everyone in the audience now knows exactly what the mission is on the easiest of simplest of terms. This is utilizing what you have in your movie brilliantly. I thought that was perfect.
And then something that Zemeckis was sort of a master at before that. In all the Back to the Future movies, it's perfect. There's always this sort of like perfectly placed explanation that feels so sort of organic,
But even with and I don't disagree because obviously I adore all of the Back to the Future movies. But even then, it's more like we're going to give this great actor Christopher Lloyd a shit ton of exposition, and he's just going to make it pop. And obviously there's the sequences where they're showing like the models and whatnot to explain it. But it felt like more like we had to carve out a compelling way to tell this versus like Jim Lovell will tell his son exactly how it's going to go down. It's so much even more.
I mean,
organic.
It's believable that astronauts are constantly like, let me explain this to you.
Yeah.
Like, you know. I did want to just... and not to harp on Ron Howard too much. And this is a very neutral statement. I'm not saying this is good or bad. I do think in his quest of just commercial appeal, this film to me feels very much a post Spielberg, post Zemeckis aesthetic. I think it's kind of the only. I won't say the only time Ron Howard tried that, but certainly the most successful and the most sort of like on tone with that.
Ron Howard does. It is interesting. I think he's he's obviously a successful filmmaker. He's good at what he does, but he doesn't usually. I don't think he brings his own visual language, which is kind of what you're saying here.
I don't think he has one.
I'm not sure he does either, and I think that's okay. It's maybe not the most compelling thing to see a movie, but...
Well, I just don't think he has any identity as a director, which is fine. It's like, and I hopefully we'll get into this later.
I mean, I guess you should as a director.
Well, I don't know. I mean,
but when you think it like he's making these studio films, he's
just trying to make like a...
Yeah, then that kind of works. They almost want you to be less of a force of...
Yeah, I don't think when, I forget the studio, Paramount or whatever, was making Apollo 13, they're like, oh, make this like chilling and Kubrickian. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
they want to like bring some intense authorial voice to it. They're like, no, I essentially do exactly what Ron Howard did.
I have to wonder if that stems from him starting so early in his career on television, where there's like, especially back in those days, such kind of a neutral point of view to the cinematic language of television.
Interesting. That's just the world he grew up on. He's just like, just think, it's just
get all the footage.
Everything is literal. You know?
Which I think works really well to this movie's credit, even if it's not the most unique take or even the original source of like, let's shoot it this way.
Right.
Everything functions so mechanically, and I mean that in a good way. It sounds bad.
No.
But because everything's so clear. It's all about clarity.
Absolutely.
Which is, I think, a huge problem that we're facing with today's filmmakers is that everything's about mystery. They're chasing that J.J. Abrams mystery box. Mystery doesn't create tension the way clarity does. That's why I think Spielberg's still the greatest Hollywood director. He creates suspense from you knowing all of the elements. I mean, it goes back to Hitchcock, where it's like, if you know there's a bomb under the table, you're worried rather than, oh, there was a bomb? What a surprise.
Right.
Surprise is not as good as suspense. And I think Ron Howard nails that here.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's... it's funny, I thought about The Martian a lot while I was watching it, because I was like, well, what is this format? Because honestly, when you think about Apollo 13, it doesn't work as a traditional spec script, because none of these characters have arcs.
No.
And it's actually not... it's not a character-driven movie.
There's a bit to... I do... When we talk about Hanks' performance, I feel like there's something there. But go on. No, I mean, it's... But what this is it's a real-life event movie.
Well, yeah, but that's the thing. Like, this sort of...
The arc is really for the audience. It's less about...
The arc is the process.
Yeah.
And I don't think
the arc is the plot.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. I think there's this, kind of fascist creative idea in movies that a character has to go from A to Z in every single movie that's ever been made ever. And you don't have... And that's always the sort of complaint that people have, I think, when they see movies. They're like, well, I didn't relate to that character, like... They weren't that likable, and like they didn't change, or like it's always around there. But
there's always like a weird checklist that I think people apply to movies, and that's a bad move. Because movies can do different things.
I just think that's an arbitrary checklist that people who kind of don't have opinions like need to go to in order to have one. But I do think like there is something to it's not nearly as detached as something as say like The Right Stuff. But it has a sense of that. You know, it has of just, oh, well, you know, we kind of set personal stakes for Jim Lovell, only really in the sense that his wife really loves him, you know, and we set up this like personal relationship, you know, just a sort of a loving, wholesome, wonderful relationship between his wife, so that, you know, when we see this guy in peril, you're like, well, I really don't want him to die because he's got this lovely family at home.
Interesting.
And those are kind of the only stakes that are set up from a screenwriting perspective.
I completely disagree.
Really?
Maybe if you're looking at strictly from screenwriting, but I even think not there. And I'll jump into it now. Because a part of it does come from the direction. This movie, it's not obviously like life. It's not quite life and death stakes like you might get in a superhero movie or whatever. But the stakes for Jim Lovell in this movie, at least the character, maybe not the real astronaut, are very real, very personal, and it's about his legacy. From the very beginning of that movie, when he rides in that red hot rod convertible,
Right.
and he's like, I'm the coolest dude ever, I'm gonna be somebody. And he's watching the Apollo 11, the moon landing with his family, with his friends.
He's like, I want the moon.
And there's that shot of him, and his son is actually in the shot too. And there's just this. It's very simple filmmaking, very simple, but effective directing. And the James Horner score comes in, and there's that slow push in. And Hanks he's just staring at a television, but he's made it more compelling than I've ever seen it. And you can tell it's not. He's the only one in the room who's not excited because they're there. He's excited because he's going to be there next.
That is interesting.
It's a quiet, very like I didn't notice it until this watch through. It's a very background arc.
Yeah.
But every time it doesn't come up in every scene, yes, but it comes up in significant moments. Like when he said, "We just lost the moon." Like after that, he's far less vocal for a good chunk of the screen time, and he's really the fact that his son is in that shot, and it's like. He's passing down something. Like it could have been a single of Hanks. Right. But he's thinking about his legacy. That's what and the way we mentioned earlier how he tells what's going to happen to his other son. And that's kind of what I think this movie is all about. It's sort of about what story are you going to leave the world? And
you feel like that's the super theme?
That's this. Well, I do want to talk a little bit about the super theme because it dips into.
I don't know if that's the main theme. Although it's funny, it's like again, I think going in critically to Apollo 13 is kind of like, I don't know there's no real point. There's a point because it's just like fun, but it's like it is just such a consensus enjoyable film.
Well, it is.
It's like to go in and to start getting like too like picky about it.
It's a little bit like The Perfect Machine.
Yeah.
It's super well greased. Like even the arc is like the perfect. I don't know if you're familiar with Dan Harmon from Community and Rick and Morty, and he has this circle theory.
Okay.
You're not familiar with this?
No, I'm not.
But basically, it's his approach to writing, and he finds that all stories have like 8 essential beats, and they form a circle. Where it's like if you break down anything that's a human story, if it's going to function as a narrative, it has like there's a person, there's a character, has a desire, they go to get it, they enter a new situation to chase after the thing they desire, they adapt to the new situation, they get the thing they desire, but it comes at a price, and then they return to their familiar situation and they've changed. And this is kind of the perfect movie to it's exactly that in the most reductive, simplest terms. Because Jim Lovell is someone who wants a legacy. He gets that legacy, but he loses the moon landing, the exact thing he wanted. But he becomes NASA's finest hour.
Right.
Which is literally true. I think, I thought it was just a thing in the movie, but if you look it up, NASA considers this rescue of these 3 men to be the most challenging and amazing thing they ever pulled off.
Which I have no doubt it is.
Which is also interesting because when I was a kid, I would think, Apollo 11 is the one where they go to the moon.
Right.
Apollo 13, they fuck it up. Why would this be a movie? But it's such a better subject for a story.
Oh, of course. Yeah, no, of course.
What do you talk about? They get to the moon and everything was great?
Everything went to plan.
Yeah.
Of course,
There's no story. That's why it's the footnote at the beginning. It's the inciting incident in this movie. And again, you're absolutely right. This is kind of like such a well-oiled machine movie. It's almost like impenetrable because it's like...
Yeah, well, I just don't think it's a movie... The Martian is the only other movie I can think that of a modern example of this sub-genre that I think Apollo 13 is in, which is basically a kind of...
Gravity didn't work for you?
Well, no, because I don't think it falls in this sub-genre of a sort of pro-science, pro-ingenuity, kind of posy, space danger.
That's not what Gravity is?
Well, no, because I think...
Gravity is much more interesting. It has a whole point of view.
Yeah, I don't think Gravity's trying to base it in any real science. By the way, Ed Harris is the voice that warns them of the
debris
in Gravity.
I didn't know
So
that.
that is 3 sort of essential space danger adventure movies that Ed Harris has a big-ish or varying degrees of involvement in. The Right Stuff, Apollo 13 and Gravity.
Interesting.
And I'd almost consider The Abyss kind of a space movie. Anyway, I think you're absolutely right. And they absolutely do sort of get that power of myth, Joseph Campbell, like hero's journey. Like they do get that into Tom Hanks's Jim Lovell's arc. But what's funny about that is that arc ends the second he says, "Gentlemen, what are your intentions? I want to get home." That's like his last scene in the movie. Just from
You're not wrong.
From
You're
a
not
sort
wrong.
of, and again, I'm not. This is not a criticism at all. It just is.
No, but
like,
you're absolutely right. That's the one thing where I think it is kind of a secondary thing to the plot.
Right.
It's he makes that's the if you're looking at the Dan Harmon circle, he hasn't technically gotten back to Earth yet, but he has changed, and he's like, I don't care about the moon anymore.
That's his transcendence. He's like,
Yeah.
it's my humanity comes forth.
Everything after that is just kind of epilogue.
But and I do think, speaking of the epilogue, that is maybe his victory. Is he's like, this is a celebratory moment, and this is the thing that I'm known for, and I'm super proud of it.
Yeah, and he gets the voiceover narration epilogue talk where
It's an odd choice, but I kind of weirdly like it that Walter Cronkite opens the movie
in a voiceover newsreel footage of Apollo 11.
which I guess they re-recorded just for the movie.
Really?
Yeah, right. Walter Cronkite just
That's awesome.
came into the studio or whatever.
That is so cool.
Yeah, well, it's the very the first. It's an obvious choice to make. Of course, he is just like, even if you don't recognize it as Walter Cronkite, he is just the voice of fact. You know, the voice of history.
I wish we had him this year.
He really should be on too.
Yeah.
I think he's no longer with us.
No.
Walter Cronkite.
No, and including this is kind of a weird transition.
Oh.
But speaking of other people no longer with us, we're recording this the day that the first American astronaut in space, the first person to go around the globe, John Glenn, has passed away today.
Has passed at 95. Who Ed Harris played in The Right Stuff. And it's the same idea. And it has that same thing of just less of a character arc and more of just getting excited by the process and getting invigorated by the science and
Well, I think especially when you're going to go for a big ticket or big tentpole Hollywood movie, making an event movie is kind of a genius move. I think it's maybe a better choice than trying to make a character-driven movie or force a character-driven story into a Hollywood picture. It works sometimes, and I love some of those movies, but event stories are kind of perfect for the Hollywood machine. Look at this. Titanic, for God's sake. The biggest movie ever until Avatar, although we had that argument earlier in the week.
Did we?
You didn't believe that people actually went to see Avatar.
I think Avatar's box office is a complete hoax.
You think it's rigged, just like
I just think the numbers
2016 election.
I still don't. Well, the recounts are still happening. I just want to have. Some things are just too unbelievable to me that I'm just I think this is how conspiracy theories sprout up, is that the facts are just too confounding that you're there's something else going on.
I have
Nobody saw
two last notes on the directing and the writing of the movie.
Yes.
One writing, there's a moment where there's one single shot in the movie where Ron Howard steals from Sam Raimi, and that's when we cut to the oxygen tanks blowing up. Do you remember? It's just
it's like an Evil
POV,
Dead.
Evil Dead, yeah. And it's what are we doing? This is exciting for a minute. I mean, not that the rest of the movie isn't exciting, but it's such a language change in the cinematography.
It is.
It sticks out like a sore thumb.
It does.
I kind of like it still.
No, me too.
But
And it's probably the worst CGI.
shot.
It's like the worst effects shot in the movie.
Which is surprising because the CGI for a mid-90s movie looks great.
Whew. I just want to say I'm a little under the weather.
Ben is our very own
Fred Hayes.
Fred Hayes today.
Yeah.
He's starting to suffer from space sickness.
Fred Hayes, played by Bill Paxton, while en route to the moon, and they're stuck in the LEM, which is at almost freezing temperatures, develops a fever to add to and this actually happened, to add to the anxiety of the whole thing. And I think I'm a little feverish. I have a cold right now. I think the situations are similar.
I think it's making the podcast more exciting.
It's very
Will
exciting.
you pass out? Will you become incoherent by the end? We're going to find out.
I have to say, I took a couple pills. I took a couple happy pills before the podcast, and they're kind of kicking in right now. So I am feeling like I'm in a different state of mind. Right
Well,
now. It's getting a little loopy.
The pointing out that on top of everything else,
Yeah.
Fred Hayes gets sick at the end is another example of just like the writing being like so tight.
That's a good device.
Yeah, they have the golden ratio of complications in this movie. It's like they solve this problem,
Right.
but then he's sick, but then they're gonna solve this problem, but oh no, the cartridge won't fit, so they're running out of oxygen. And then they solve that problem, but the heat shield's down, and they solve this, and it's like just one after another. And I think that's why the movie lasts so long after Hanks's arc is over.
Right. Because there's just more to go.
But it totally works.
It would feel contrived if they had to I think if that movie got written today, he would have some made up dumb personal obstacle that he has to that's married to the ingenuity of getting home, that once he overcomes this is kind of what I didn't like about Gravity was this forced character arc. It's like her surviving is in parallel with her getting over the death of her daughter or something. And it's like
the thing.
Stop forcing these arbitrary character. I mean, I'm sort of and this is getting into more macro stuff that maybe we don't need to get into, but I just think character arcs in general are kind of silly. I mean, they're necessary just because they are natural to life and they are natural to humanity and they are natural just by virtue of being a human being, you have an arc and you change, you go through things. But this sort of this format that's been sort of forced on movies for so long is just feeling so tired. I'm so sick of characters with emotional issues that they have to get over that feel just like some hack screenwriter made up. And it's always a dead daughter.
Here's
so many dead daughters.
Here's where I'm going to defend the hacky screenwriters, I guess. Excuse me.
It's been done well.
Oh shit.
Yeah, you're getting sick.
I'm getting sick.
We need a CO2 filter.
Oh no!
Listen, this has been kicked down from
if
the top
Forrest
floor.
Gump doesn't come out next week, you know why.
Oh,
shit. All right. You're absolutely right in
Yeah.
that there is kind of, especially now, and maybe it's just us becoming more savvy film watchers, but
Yeah.
when you feel the formula this heavily, and I'm a big fan of the Marvel movies, but Doctor Strange's formula as a character arc is so in your face. And I still like the movie a lot, but
Yeah.
it's just character arc.
I just don't think people are going to movies to see Doctor Strange become less materialistic.
Here's the defense of
I don't think anyone
character
cares.
arcs.
Anyway, yeah, sorry.
Character arcs are effectively communication. And what stories are how we shape our perspective. Stories are communicating empathy, essentially.
Yeah.
And I think that's a fundamental reason why humans are storytelling species. And I think that's why stories are so important, why I love stories, and it's also how you can totally abuse stories.
Right.
So I think the character arc as a you almost bring it up as if it's a cliche or something is
No, it's so much more fundamental to
it is
than
fundamental
being a
to
cliche.
stories. And I think
Yeah.
even going back to the Dan Harmon circles point being that it's kind of the skeleton of what a story is an arc. It doesn't have to be a character arc.
I think the event. I'm not trying to be contrarian by disagreeing with that, but I do just think let's just ask the question: whether or not that's the case. I mean, I would just challenge all of these fundamentals of storytelling. One being, that we watch movies or read books or engage in art to for an empathetic reason, to feel like someone is speaking to us and communicating with us and sort of expressing a state of mind or a way of being that is where you're like, oh, I relate to that. Yes, that exists, but I would say, 90% of the stuff that I consume, that's not why I'm going into it. I don't know why I'm going into it, but I'm not going I want someone to relate to. I want a situation to relate to,
You almost conflated art and story there, and I think they obviously overlap.
Yes, narrative. You know what? We have a vocab issue right now. Narrative structure is one thing. Narrative is a thing, and there are rules to narrative and all that stuff.
And you can still break these rules.
Yeah,
obviously.
you play with them, but essentially, I do sort of believe in those mythic structures of narrative. For
and
sure.
I am the last person to be campaigning for more Joseph Campbell. Let me just get that out there. I didn't want to make that because leave that shit in the dust.
Well, it's funny that someone always repackages the hero's journey as their own thing. They're like, "Hey, save the cat," and you're just like, "Oh, well, you just
save the cat." So, what do you think is the worst part of the movie? Completely sweeping under the rug the entire discussion of character arcs. We never really landed anywhere on that. Well, maybe we'll circle back to it. But
if we want to put my whole reason for getting into character arcs as it relates to Apollo 13, I want to say it is for me, for an establishment Hollywood movie, refreshingly sort of clear of character arcs. And like you said, there is sort of a light one with Jim Lovell, but something that's nice that I think is sort of so uncluttered about it is that they're not trying to give Ed Harris's character some A to Z. They're not really trying to give anyone that much of a growth.
I think
which is just nice because it just focuses the movie in this one sort of energy.
Yeah, and I think that's where the arc isn't a character necessarily. It's the arc of the event.
Yeah.
Which I think...
It would just be nice, I think, if more movies just committed, more Hollywood movies kind of committed to that. That was all. That was my only thing. And
I think I said the same thing when I brought up how they should have more event movies earlier.
We've gotten this point across. This
now we're hammering it home, which is also the good old-fashioned Hollywood way.
Good.
So
worst part of the movie.
That was something you like. What's the worst part of the movie for you?
Again, to me is I think it's snobby to come in and call that movie cheesy because it's especially for blockbusters, and this was absolutely a blockbuster.
Yes.
Poised as one and received as one. To look at dated blockbuster, it is over 20 years old now. And to be like, well, that part was cheesy and that part was... However, if I had to say there was a worse part, I do think there are these kind of overly staged Oscar moments or trailer moments in the movie, both in the writing, both in the performance. The three that come to mind, one is, although people would say, Houston, we have a problem, I actually think for Hanks, it is that moment of him being like, gentlemen, what are your intentions? Which actually, I guess I was reading, he did say that on the Craft. That's one moment. Kathleen Quinlan's like, you can ask my husband. He'll be home on Friday. And then, of course, Ed Harris's We've Never Lost an American in Space, and we're sure as hell aren't going to lose one on my watch, which I think is really funny from a blocking standpoint because he's at this chalkboard where, they're figuring everything out, and he says that.
Great bit of business when he tries to use the overhead and the projection.
I like that.
And then it comes, that's the great stuff. That's
always a good joke of this is the most technically proficient room in the world. And
chalkboard.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well,
another great point of view, or another great credit to just making the most clear thing in a movie could be he draws out exactly what's happening.
Yeah, no.
Everybody in the audience is up to speed.
And you see sort of the progress of where they are in space. Yeah, no, it's really good device.
But you were saying in that
I'll say that moment like those three moments do feel a little forced, you know. But something that struck me watching it this time, particularly in Ed Harris's big trailer Oscar moment, is he says that, and then he sort of emphatically walks away. And then they cut, of course, because it's just like a great like mic drop moment.
Yeah.
But, you know, in my mind, I was just like, dude, get back to the chalkboard. Like, where are you go? Like, I know we've never lost an American in space, but like, we gotta figure this out. Like, what are you do? Where are you going, Gene? Like, get back to the chalkboard.
He needed to pee.
Maybe you just need to pee.
Yeah.
That could be it.
I'm sure that's all it was. We only saw Tom Hanks pee. And the bags of pee.
And I do like that was addressed. So I would say, you know, just in a very sort of, in a way, those are the moments that feel the most dated to me, the most kind of like Hollywood cheesy. Like,
it's very like, that'll be our Independence Day.
Yeah, literally. And it's almost like they're pre-cutting the trailer with those moments. However, the only acting nominations went to Kathleen Quinlan and Ed Harris, so I guess it worked.
It did work, yeah.
In the time.
And even though Hanks wasn't nominated, he got the line that is remembered to this day. It's on the bathroom stalls of AMC theaters that are out of order.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, it is pretty funny.
like
but
that.
it's interesting, that line, and that's another moment. You're absolutely right. It is like shot to be iconic when he says, "Houston, we have a problem." And there's even like that zoom in, and it's like it's perfectly iconic. But I think it works.
Well,
I
it's
buy
smart. You know, listen, again, as much as I criticize that as being like, oh, that feels kind of, you know, forced.
I think you can go for the iconic and achieve it, and
to have the sort of foresight to be like, this is going to be...
This is the moment.
Yeah, to have the sort of sales of the movie in mind as you're shooting it, I think that's smart, you know, or at least I think that's opportunistic in a way that doesn't offend me at all.
It's certainly the job they set out to do.
Yeah, exactly.
I think if I'm going to point out...
Like the heroes at NASA on that fateful mission in 1970.
Indeed. I think the biggest... well, there actually is one bigger problem, but talking about the story first would be the dream sequences. There's 2 in this movie.
Oh,
you could cut them both.
Yeah.
I think they are used for the trailer moments. That's kind of the only reason I think they're there. The first one is the worst because it's just... We jump ahead. We think we're already in space, before we even see the launch
Everything
sequence.
goes wrong,
and he gets sucked out into space.
That's
my god!
That's her dream. That's Marilyn's.
That
dream.
was the one interesting thing. It was like, oh, we're in her point of view. All of a sudden,
you know, I would say this is a slight screenwriting flaw. Now that I think about it, is that Marilyn Lovell's, as much as we focus on her, it's not really paid off beyond just being like, yay!
No, she loses the wedding ring, and that never comes up again.
Well, you'd think that there'd at least be like a Jim Marilyn reunion, because that's what that storyline is really moving toward, and that's her payoff, and that's the thing that would give her the most joy in the sort of stress matrix of the movie.
You get it through her reaction to the television, but
She's
you never
happy.
see them together on screen again.
It seems odd, but the thing is,
weirdly like Sully, actually, where we never get to see him with his wife ever.
There are some strange resonances.
Similarities, yeah.
I was thinking
it's a failed flight,
right?
But he still manages to save everybody,
right? And the messaging at the end, I would say the super theme of Sully and Apollo 13 are we all did it together.
Yeah,
we all work together. That's how it's a family ingenuity message. It's people work, miracles don't just happen. They work with a lot of smart people, a lot of dedicated people, hardworking people, all doing their job. It's very American.
All white people.
Well.
Coming into the real problem of the movie.
Well, is that a problem of the movie?
I think it is a problem with the movie, and I'll explain why. This isn't like...
I bet it's accurate casting. I guarantee you there was not a black person...
Oh, I'm gonna school the fuck out of you.
Uh-oh.
Because
let's cut this
That's
part.
maybe what I thought at first. Because this isn't like last week when we mentioned how Michael Clark Duncan's the only person of color in The Green Mile, because that is a story that would facilitate that.
Yeah, that's
casting.
like Jim Crow South.
But there's not I was looking in this movie. There's not a single person of color.
I assume because they did research and every single one of those texts was accounted for, and they're all just like white dudes with crew cuts.
And isn't this the saddest thing? Because that's what I'm sure everyone was taught. But in fact, there's a woman named Kathleen Johnson, who is a NASA physicist, mathematician, scientist, who is actually, they're making a whole fucking movie about her.
Oh, it's the one coming out.
Hidden Figures, which is coming out next year.
God.
And she and...
No, this year.
Is it?
It's going to be like an Oscar movie this year.
But yeah, Hidden Figures is coming out, and she's this woman who was involved in the NASA space program. Obviously, she was completely discriminated against because she's a woman. She's black. They don't treat her well, and she's been completely erased from history. And this, except for like last year, 2015, President Obama gave her and several of her other coworkers the Medal of Freedom. For what she did.
She was involved in the Apollo 13?
She was involved in the fucking moon landing, first of all.
What?
Got them. She's the one who's like basically writing the math for the trajectories. But the fact is, in 1970, she worked on the Apollo 13 mission, and she was a huge reason for how they basically saved the crew.
Shut up.
She made the backup procedures to get them home.
They didn't want to give that to Angela Bassett or someone?
I know!
That would have been a great foil. Like, that would have been a great...
Cut out fucking the Maryland story. That's a way better story.
100%.
And how, like, obviously...
Oh, this is all taking a turn.
Isn't it?
Gary Sinise is some right-wing a-hole.
I'm ruining Apollo 13. That was the arc of the podcast.
Apollo 13 is willingly whitewashing history.
It is!
For a movie that prided itself on so much historical accuracy.
And even the theme you were going for, where it's like, we did this together. We didn't. White people did this together. This is a Trump movie.
This is a pre-Trump movie.
It is really terrible because that character didn't need to be the focus of the movie.
That would have made it so much. That would have made it way like.
How cool would it have been in 1996? There just happens to be a black woman scientist in this movie,
but as a sort of texture to
Apollo 13, not even the story. It's just she's just there.
It would have been to see like her coming up against Gene Kranz, Ed Harris. You know, here's the thing I was thinking too. Like I like all the character actors that kind of fill out the flight crew. What do you call it? The command center or whatever.
Mission control.
Lot of interesting faces.
Well, you get Clint Howard in there.
Clint Howard, but Lauren Dean, who's a kind of I think underrated actor who I really like. This guy named Jim Meskimen, who's actually the world's greatest impressionist. It's like 2 lines in it. There's all these interesting actors, but they do sort of. One starts blending into the other because they all are just white dudes in their 30s and 40s. Yeah. So it does be that sort of characterization, both in the writing and just how it's staged, gets a little bland. So that would have been something. A, it would have been great because it's historically accurate, and B, it would have been great just as a screenwriting device, as a dramatic device.
It's just visual diversity. I don't even mean in the fucking race diversity. I mean like, it's not another white thing we're looking at.
Oh, I'm sorry, Ron Howard. Was it going to distract from your heroic story of white men overcoming obstacles? Oh, sorry. Sorry that the truth got in the way of your dumb, cheesy movie that I no longer like.
It's pretty terrible. Like, when I kept looking for it, I was like, come on. And then I was thinking, okay, maybe Hidden Figure, like, because I knew this was in the news, maybe Kathleen Johnson was after this. And no, she was
doing
there.
math. She was on that chalkboard.
Clint Howard's the one who's doing the math, right? And he's like, I need to double check this.
Oh,
that should have been her.
Oh, I see.
But he gave it to his brother.
Oh, Clint didn't have a part. So let's write this amazing, brilliant woman out of history. Okay, Ron Howard.
I feel bad because every time we talk about Ron Howard,
I feel bad for that woman.
I should talk, but this is true. You fucked up. Wow. I like Splash still, but you know what? There's probably no black people in that movie either.
And I bet when you look at the facts of Splash, at the historical accuracy,
that mermaid was Asian.
I'm sure she was Asian. This is ridiculous.
Oh,
I didn't know that.
I didn't either.
I didn't know that at all. Wow.
And it does kind of taint the movie.
Well, I mean, listen, I'm not trying
Good thing we won't have to be talking about race or anything like that next week when it's perfect.
I'm sorry that I got in a fight and ruined your Black Panther party. I mean, listen, I'm not trying to, I try not to get into a liberal tizzy about stuff like this. And of course, it's like, when you watch certain movies, even movies like older movies.
Where
I often am the first person to forgive the blatant misogyny, the racism.
Exactly.
But this is 1995. We are in the groovy Clinton ascendancy. It's a missed opportunity. It's a missed opportunity.
The problem is you can't even justify it as like, oh, it's just, white-mindedness not thinking of it because you had to actively erase this person.
I bet this is what it was. I bet this is exactly what it was because they did all their research. That was one of the big selling points of this movie. Is that it's like one of this really well researched. It's an educational and exciting experience. They knew about this woman, okay? And Ron Howard was in his mission control with his dumb screenwriters, and they were like, you know what? If we have her as a character, we're gonna have to like address the black thing, and we're gonna have to like get into race relations, and that's just distracting from our story, which is just there's a way to handle that
and not make
in
it
a
the
subtle
focus
way.
of the movie.
How about just doing it as it happened? I bet they were like, okay, we hate you because you're black, and we've been hating you because you're black because we're just like dumb racist, like astronaut dudes. But we're putting that aside for now because we got to get these guys home, and she knows the math, so we have to like deal with this. So like they could have had a very, very easy little mini arc that just got us to there, and then we never have to think about it again.
You know what the perfect example is of this kind of thing where it's like we're gonna showcase a black character, but we can't spend the time on their story, but we're not going to also take away what would have been the reality.
Yeah.
A little movie called A League of Their Own. There's one scene where there's a black woman who gets to throw a baseball over to Gina Davis, and they can't play because they're black. And this is just a white woman's game, but there's a nod of acknowledgement between the characters that this girl knows how to play. And it includes anybody, it doesn't disclude anybody who's not white from watching this movie. It's like, it is historically accurate, but we give a nod to this.
Right.
And you could have done this character in the exact same way. Have her have a 3-beat, a 2-beat for all you say.
Easy.
And you don't even have to like, it doesn't have to be the focus.
We have to worry about Susie Homemaker and her fucking wedding ring.
Mm-hmm. Which goes nowhere.
I'm so
no,
sorry.
You're
I don't mean to curse, but I just... This is shocking to me.
It is.
This is horrible.
It ruins the movie when you think of it like that.
I mean, it doesn't... Again, you can still...
We just talked about...
From a craft point of view or whatever, just
well
like as
done.
a movie experience, you can just watch. It's a very like holiday-ish movie in a way. Like
it's really well made. We just spent a long time talking about that.
But
there's this sense of insidiousness behind it. Like it's like this, and I think that's the worst part. Again, if you go to the super theme, we all did this together, but it's actively
exclusive
about that, and that's
a problem.
It's a hollow.
That's a problem.
It's a hollow message.
It is.
It's a hypocritical message.
What was her name?
Kathleen Johnson.
Kathleen
Coleman Goebel Johnson, or perhaps Gobble. No, it's got to be Goebel.
Kathleen. Well, I'm seeing Hidden Figures, even though it looks. Well, it
looks kind of like Hollywood formula, like Apollo 13.
It does. I mean, it looks...
This movie comes out at Christmas.
Yeah.
Go see this movie
this Christmas.
Hidden
Figures.
Okay.
Burn your copy of Apollo 13. I don't know if you have an old VHS.
Hidden Figures comes out this Christmas. Christmas Day.
That's a real movie about
Go
NASA.
See it.
Not some fake whitewashing movie about NASA like Apollo 13.
There's no Tom Hanks, unfortunately, but the movie will probably at least...
If Tom Hanks knew about this... He would have objected.
He would have.
No, it's the technical advisors are feeding him the information,
yes.
And he's very interested in it, but if he had known, he would have insisted that this character be included. Period.
Yes.
Wow.
It's really it's such a albatross on this movie's neck that it kind of sinks it.
It's an albatross on my neck, personally.
It should be.
Because this was...
And just here's I'll make one more point about this. In case there's anybody listening do we have to PC everything? Do we have to diversify everything? Here's the point. look back at, like, there's a lot of people who are complaining, oh, there's
Yeah.
too much diversity in the new Star Wars movies.
Because it feels like tokenism.
It feels like tokenism.
Okay.
But even if it is tokenism, here's the point versus, like, completely white Star Wars. This is a movie like having the black person, the Asian person, having these people of color, these non-white people, these non-white characters in this movie isn't just for the non-white audiences. It's also for the white audiences because we've spent so many years, so many decades of TV, movies, just media in general filled with white people that there are still so many people that that consider non-white people to be the other. And that is something we have seen brutally realized with this election and this year is there's just a lack of empathy for people who are not like you, for people who do not look like you. And the fact that this movie went out of its way to remove someone who just looked a little different.
Absolutely, 100%. Here's another, I think, like relatively strong reason to include Kathleen Johnson in Apollo 13 because she saved the astronauts of Apollo 13.
Even more important,
because she literally was there and she literally saved their lives.
You're absolutely right. That the whole speech I just gave wasn't just like, oh, it's important to have a black person.
No, but that is important. But that's
is
all valid.
But that's nothing compared to the fact she was there.
She was there.
What the fuck?
Those men would be dead if it wasn't for that woman who got boned by Ron Howard. The racist Ron Howard and his crony.
Racist Ron Howard!
Racist Ron
Howard! Hashtag
racist Ron Howard and his snarling little villain sidekick Gary Sinise. Who is a disgrace to Highland Park High School.
And a disgrace to the legacy of a good man named Tom Hanks.
God. This is what I have to say. I did not expect to get this emotional about it.
That's what happens on this show.
But this is really, like, I did not think... I thought there was going to be 100% celebratory conversation.
No.
I didn't, in no way thought that this was going to happen.
Celebrating Hanks. Love him. He's great in this.
Oh, sure. We can talk about specifically Hanks' performance. Mm-hmm. Actually, I have to...
Wait, you have to pee in the middle of this?
We should pee like the astronauts.
We should pee, yeah. You get the bag. Right. What are you doing? All right, he's not going on theme. All right, I'm gonna pause.
Okay.
All right, we're back.
And we're back.
How was your pee? Was it like the astronauts?
No, I'm sure they had. I'm sure they're much better hydrated than I am right now.
All right.
Well, toward the end they weren't.
So, what is the legacy of this movie?
The legacy of Apollo 13, I think the legacy is probably less of a film legacy. It defines a sense of Americana, both of the time that it's portraying, but also I do think it is a bit of a time capsule for, and I do think Tom Hanks as a celebrity, but both as a man in his interests, and I know you've sort of talked about this on the show before, also encapsulates this a kind of an attempt to reinvigorate a sense of patriotism in the Clinton era. It's a very baby boomer goal, and it was, using these great accomplishments of their past, their parents, essentially.
What they would probably,
to kind of take what was a developing slacker generation and try to get them kind of just involved again in this idea of American victory. And I also think Saving Private Ryan was that too.
Yeah, I think Saving Private Ryan does that significantly better.
Well, it's it's a completely different tone in a way.
But not even just comparing the quality of the movies, but the lasting impact.
Yeah,
Saving Private Ryan rings throughout.
Yeah,
Apollo 13, I think, is good. Its qualities are only good when it's evident, when you remember it exists.
Yeah, and I think
when you look at what's the best real life space movie? this is up there, but like, are people thinking about this?
Yeah, I think it's one of those movies that, while it was wildly popular when it came out, has definitely faded. I don't know if it's necessarily as much of an evergreen Tom Hanks title as some of the like Gump and some of the other ones.
Even when you look at Tom Hanks's legacy, Apollo 13 is barely up there.
Yeah, it was just kind of like another hit.
It's not. I think it's considering how little there is to play with Jim Lovell.
Yeah.
I think he does a great job.
Yeah.
But like when you compare him to the other real life people he's played, outside of maybe Sully, it's not as interesting as those.
Yeah, there's just not much depth to the character, and there's not much conflict to the character, so there's just not. Again, from a performance aspect, there's not much for anyone to really work with that much.
And obviously there's now this like, when you dig deep into it, there's this legacy of whitewashing with the movie, and that puts a whole other thing.
It really does.
But
it really does.
I'd say there's two real things that
Shameful.
are indeed legitimately, but I think there's two real things that are the legacy of this movie.
Okay.
And the one thing that has outlasted everything that you still remember today is Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah.
That line, which interestingly is not the actual line when that was not. It was changed from the original ship. The original trip.
Jim Lovell actually said something like, "Houston, we have a problem"?
Actually, that's the crazy thing. The original line was, "Houston, we've had a problem here."
Oh.
And it was said by Swigert, by Kevin Bacon's character. They changed
also
it.
Shameful. Less shameful, just in intensity, but also
I'm going to give it to
that dude said it.
I'm going to give it to
you have
them.
to give it to the lead.
It has to be, and it's such a good Hanks line.
That line in that moment sold that movie so, because I'm of an age where I have actually a very vivid memory of watching when those trailers and like how that movie was marketed. That was like, you don't really get taglines anymore. That's a sort of marketing tool of the past. But man, that worked. I cannot tell you how well that worked.
It's still working on. I'm thinking about that line, and I'm liking the movie again, even after all this horrible stuff we just talked about.
Oof.
But this is the legacy that people will think of when they think of Apollo 13. Is that Houston?
I think so too. Yeah, that's still indelible.
But Apollo 13 has an even greater legacy relevant to this new digital age.
Oh.
And that is Netflix.
Huh.
Apollo 13 is inadvertently responsible for Netflix as an entire company.
As an entire company?
Here's what happened. Little story time. This is how we're going to end the episode.
In the world?
Way back in 1997, after the movie had been, it's out of theaters and it's now on.
When they used to wait a year. Like a calendar year before you could rent it.
And you rented it from a store. You went to a video store and they had VHS tapes, which is what they had before DVDs, which is what they had before Blu-rays.
True.
So there's a guy named Reed Hastings.
Oh, sure. That's the guy
who goes on to be the co-founder of Netflix. Okay. And he rents Apollo 13 and late charges. You remember late fees?
Oh,
if you didn't return the movie.
Do I remember late fees? I
still have some to pay. Thank goodness Blockbuster went out of business.
Oh my God. That Jerry Springer highlights.
More expensive than
just like really. I'm trying to date it.
Speaking of the 90s.
Yeah, exactly.
Perfect. Okay. So those late fees would charge the hell out of you. So he rents Apollo 13 on VHS. Forgets to return it for God knows how long, probably a minute. And they stick him with a $40 late charge. So he's slammed with this late fee. He's pissed off. And he's like, why can't there be another way? A better way. So he comes up with this idea for a mail order movie service.
Unbelievable. He
learns from a friend that DVDs are on their way out. They're going to be a thing. So he gets the idea to try mailing himself a CD. Just a blank CD in an envelope. Seals it up. He mails it to himself. 24 hours go by. He's terrified it's not going to work.
Yeah.
Comes in the mail. Perfectly fine. And thus the idea for Netflix was born. Goes on to become this ubiquitous millionaire company.
No,
billionaire.
Billion.
It's capitalized the market. It's killed Blockbuster. There are no video stores. And it's all because of
this
Apollo.
Racist Apollo 13. So let me get this straight. This movie that I watched with my father, and I remember walking out having a truly father-son bond. That was a great bonding movie for a father and a son in 1995.
Going back to that legacy shot where we see Tom Hanks and his son walking
out with my dad and us just being, feeling the warmth of just like Hanks just as a presence, but then within this, very uplifting, awe-inspiring movie. You're telling me that this movie, Apollo 13, on one level casts right-winger lunatics like Gary Sinise. On another level, writes African American heroes out of history for its own, God knows, for its own selfish purposes, and effectively killed video stores, which are so important to me. I worked at video stores for a year. That is like the one that the dying of that industry is like the death of my childhood, and is like defines so much of who I am. I hate this movie. I hate Apollo 13.
The Netflix thing didn't bring it up. You don't like Netflix.
I mean, I like Netflix just, like I like The Sun or something. Just like, because I have no choice. But like, no, I mean, it effectively, it started this cultural and economic chain reaction that killed storefront video stores,
So effectively, Apollo 13, in your eyes, has destroyed everything great about America.
Just everything I stand for.
Everything the movie seems to be saying, it is
tearing down.
Destroyed.
Absolutely.
Apollo 13, the greatest lie in the Hanks library.
Oof, Houston, we have a problem.
Yes! All right. Ben, thanks so much for being on the show and for letting me ruin so much of your childhood and this movie for you.
Thank you for having me.
Where can they find you?
I do have a website.
Do you want people to look at it?
Sure. It's filmbybenjaminshearn.com. I'm sure we'll link it in the description.
The show notes, yes.
Yeah. And you can see some of the artsy fartsy nonsense that I've made. But really, you should just call me. 323-217-9579. That's really the best way to... I think that's a more vivid way to just like get involved with like what I offer. The website really isn't representative of it. So just give me a call.
Oh, that is his number. I'm not gonna edit this out.
Let me say it just in case you miss it. 323-217-9579. Give me a call. I will talk to you about anything if you want to talk to that type problems. I'm just a shoulder to cry on.
Of course, next week we'll be back with Forrest Gump and the 50th episode of TomHanksgiving. It's going to be a huge day.
I'll be listening.
You will be.
I will. That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. Follow the show on Twitter at tomhankspod. Follow me at Elvis Kunesh. I'm on Instagram, Twitter. And, of course, visit us at our home base, splotstudios.com, SPLOT studios.com, for the podcast, for video shorts, and all sorts of fun. And don't forget to rate and review us on iTunes. And don't forget to tell everybody that this movie is totally racist. Yes. Maybe start the hashtag movement, Racist Ron Howard. Just putting it out there.
Let's get it out there.
Until next week, thanks for listening.
Tom Hanks, we fell in love with you, Tom Hanks. Just like so many do deeply, because you made us smile, and your great on-screen style. So that's why we give thanks. 'Cause you got a friend in Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks.
This movie's about men
overcoming
who are experts in their field in extraordinary circumstances, and that's exactly what's happening tonight.